Deputy Director for Special Economic Zones and Industrial Parks at the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, as well as co-founders of SBKids, Siphiwe Tshabalala and his wife, Bokang. And you're part of the conversation tonight. You can drop us your questions and comments on 072-110-5584. Otherwise, tweet us tonight at Newzroom405. Good to have you tonight with us here on In Focus. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thami Klassen, let's start with you. And 10 years on, have we successfully, or can we say, we've managed to leverage the local content framework for economic transformation?
Yeah, I think that's a big ask to say, you know, we've gotten a breakthrough that, because our, I think, economic construct is a very dicey one, you know, a very complicated one, so to say. And it's got very different elements with which we need to consider how to then move towards seeing. I think, you know, if you look at how Department of Trade and Industry used to also host SMMEs, and then they moved out so they can have focus. So there's been a lot of, I think, you know, avenues and a lot of efforts to try and understand what we are seized with. We've put a number of programs, obviously, in the past as government to try and assist towards the narrative of, say, how do we then create an economy that would be inclusive of all. I think it's not the first time we are hearing of inclusive economy. It has been used under different philosophies or doctrines, you know, or policy, you know, instruments. To date, of course, the tool that's most prevalently used is the special economic zones and the industrial parks. Yeah. But these, of course, started way back, you know, where we had these industrial zones which were located around or having access to the ports and things like that. Yeah. Today, of course, we are also focusing in the inland to try then and deal with those areas that were previously marginalized. So the context, I think, of understanding the economic development space is complicated because you have existing businesses that have entrenched how they do business in relation to getting profitability. Right. And those are complicated. You can't, even if we have got you know, policies like BBBE in place. We've tried to do procurement, preferred procurement, you know, policies and framework in place, but you still have those kind of challenges. Yes. You know, we try to put, you know, preferred procurement in terms of local content, 30%, and all those kind of things. We still are. In a way, you know, there's a pushback, you know, and that's why we need the dialogues, and that like has happened, a number of dialogues. We still continue to have these dialogues with just private entities. Overall, there is support of what the government is trying to do in transformation. Yeah. But I think there are things that we can look at and say, yeah, we've achieved quite a number of
I'm going to come back to that because we have 11 of these special economic zones, and they come with a lot of promise for the local community in which they come in terms of delivering of jobs and so on and so forth. But let's bring in the entrepreneurs here and talk a little bit about this local content framework. Bokang, has this in any way, firstly, changed the psyche of the South African consumer to move from what they're previously choosing to choose to invest in the local productive capacity and to believe that, look, I can invest in this local infrastructure and it's actually the same quality that I would get in any global market?
I think firstly, as a small business owner, it's always extremely difficult to make sure. I mean, one of the things you try and do is make sure that you give your customers something that is of great quality, right? And of course, as South Africans, we are still we still have the mentality of everything else from outside is better. And I think, and that is why even today at the Buy Local Summit, we really discussed it in depth to say we have to change the mindset, you know, and also just making sure that the economy moves around our communities as well. You know, we spoke about the importance of, you know, supporting that mama who sells amagwinya because she's probably taking her kids to school with that money, you know, to support a brand like ours. It is in retailers, and we see that South Africans are buying it because it is of the right quality. So when you look at an SBKids Princess Bokang dress, it's of the exact same quality as a Disney princess dress. So quality is extremely extremely important. And I think as we continue to make sure that we give people, products of great quality, then they'll definitely start seeing the importance of buying local as well.
Yeah. So it's greatly debated that when we create a platform like Buy Local, the biggest challenge for entrepreneurs is access to market. And this platform is one that is able to somewhat, if you're a member of it, create access to market. How true is that?
Definitely. I think it was a great platform and very informative, whereby all the speakers, they shared their challenges, their highs and lows. However, it's still a big challenge, for entrepreneurs or businesses to get access to funding. And also, it is not just funding, but information and the knowledge about the business and as to where to go about, in terms of trying to get the proper channels as well.
Yeah.
So it was a great platform in that regard. And I think to us as entrepreneurs, it's a big play to the government institutions to believe in us, to support in us. We just need that opportunity to play, on a bigger scale in the economy.
Right.
I think.
What do you mean? South African entrepreneurs were diaspora channel. What is this thing called a channel? What does it look like for you? This thing called a channel for an entrepreneur in your particular space.
We need opportunities, right? Not only in financial means, but we need opportunities where we can learn. And with us, the advantage of our journey was that when we started, we had the mechanism to start.
Right.
We had the resources to start,
the means,
and obviously to launch and to do the marketing, in our own social media platforms. However, it's difficult for a beginner, and it's difficult to get access to funding. And also, there's this mentality that we need to change and bring a counter-narrative to it, that in order for you to start the business, you don't need funding first, but you need to do a thorough research. You need those channels that I was talking about so that you can learn. By the time you start applying for funding, then you're doing it from an informed position.
So normally argued that that's finance is not really the biggest issue to failure of entrepreneurs, but it's access to markets. Because if you can demonstrate to a financier that you've got access to markets, they will generally release the money to you, and if you've got a good plan and a good marketing and a good support on that particular program. Access to markets, have we managed to answer the question to the challenge of access to markets?
I think I would take it even further than that. The issue of access to markets, it is important. And I think maybe we can even do a study in terms of companies that we've taken abroad, whether in the continent or overseas, and then come back and see whether did they use those opportunities, or we've got to go back to what Shaba is talking about earlier on, that you've got to have that vision first. You've got to create a product, believe in that product first before you can want to venture into asking for money and things like that. The biggest failure in our assessment, having dealt with different programs in government, is that there's no quality of business cases. People don't understand. There's a lot of copycatting sometimes that is prevalent in just across when they've seen a person. And creativity and innovation. I emphasized it this afternoon at the expo. It's important because this is what is going to get us to catapult into great things into the future. I mean, youth. I believe in the youth because they're young, they've got innovations, fresh minds, they can look at things differently, not the way of the conventional old patterns. So, and that's what you need to drive economies into new perspective, into new opportunities, new things. And I think if we focus on those things, just basically But of course, the issue of capacity building to do a good business case, that's also learned with experiences. Another thing that people tend to do is you have these big volumes of business cases. I mean, we've had the stories overseas, you know, it doesn't take more than 10 pages, 20 pages for you to have a quality business case, you know. But a lot of people supply all sorts of information that's not relevant when you talk to that person.
But that's cousin, this is part of your own processes. Have you tried to apply for anything at the DTI? You want reams and reams and reams of documents. And the World Bank has actually said that you need to find a way to streamline your processes and your procedures in terms of registration, in terms of licensing, in terms of trade logistics, just making the cost of doing business a little bit cheaper, because you just put all these in place that make it really cumbersome and maybe even inhibitive for someone who wants to get in there. We'll tackle that when we come back from the break. Do get in touch with us tonight, 072-110-5584. Otherwise, tweet us at Newzroom405. In Focus continues in a minute. With you tonight, how are African brands faring against global brands? This as we observe this Buy Local Summit 2022, and emphasis is being put on the local content framework and how this could unlock jobs, this could unlock certainly markets, and certainly help as far as creating industry in South Africa. Now, before the break, we're talking about some of those hurdles, procedural hurdles that discourage local production or people to begin to invest in local production infrastructure. Thami Klassen, before the break, I was saying that the procedures, the registration, the licensing, the trade logistics, the proper infrastructure generally just to set up. I mean, if you have to get water rights, if you have to get electricity rights, it is quite cumbersome and inhibitive for local entrepreneurs who would want to get into big spaces and become meaningful players.
I think we need to consider this issue of sometimes people arguing that we can't be talking about the past. You see the way our economy is structured. These are fundamental but important things to consider, because people are marginalized along racial lines, along communities, you know, etc., etc. And people have become entrenched in those thinking processes, the culture in which they understand how to do business. And for you to apply a different change process, you got to consider the cultural practices in that community. It's been proven all over by research documents that you got to articulate how you do business according to people's culture and context. Now, we can be blamed for producing probably documents written in English and big volumes, but the communities oftentimes don't give feedback. Maybe there's a language barrier in that, but I think there needs to be a vocalization of those sentiments, so that policy, remember, it's not created out of a vacuum. It is what government sees based on interacting with communities, which of course the Lekgotla, and then it eventually comes to the departments, you know, where we then construct these policies. But we don't take them out of vacuum. But oftentimes, even if you get a window to amend some of these, you don't get the feedback that you want. And of course, once it's there, it's approved by cabinet, it becomes difficult for you to change it. And of course, we interact with the different committees and communities as well, committees in parliament and communities, to see what is the impact of those things that we're doing. For example, there is a report recently completed by DPME, which looks into those things. How do the SEZ, how do the industrial parks, do we have a narrative called township economy or rural economy, you know, because we use these terms loosely. But when you go to Shaba and Bokang and say, do you really feel what we're doing? They say, no, you know, I've been through these hurdles. So we are trying to work in order to dismantle these things that are hampering doing, I think, you know, especially localization. Right. The term has been used or abused. Yes. You know, we need to go back into the fundamentals. What do we mean when we say localization to people who are staying in Mamelodi? You know, that big community. What do? I argue for myself.
The danger of that for some entrepreneurs is that then government begins to think, when we say localization, then it must be somebody either who owns a saloon, owns a car wash, because it's in the context of what's happening in Mamelodi. And you don't break out of that particular type of business. Then we will copycat, because that's all really that government is funding. So if you open a car wash and you are successful, I'm also going to go and apply so I can open a car wash, because clearly that's what government is funding. But there are people who are coming up with innovation and things that are really not in the space in which they are, and they would like you to come in and support that.
Look, Tawa, when we look at the digital economy, it has provided a very conducive platform for us to develop many useful enterprises, and even women-driven enterprises, because it's all the space, everybody, it equalizes everybody. You know, nobody has been there, nobody has done that, but here's a digital economy providing those opportunities. Maybe how then we collaborate, both government and private, you know, small businesses, into how do we create an infrastructure that will be enabled. Obviously, we'll talk of data. You know, we'll also talk about power, you know, things like that. How do we create an alternative generation of electricity to power those things? So there's numerous things which we can look at. How do we get our youth, how do we get our communities to think afresh? I mean, a study, and I think the Graham Bank in India, by the professor, I can't remember the name of the professor now, but they utilize women from rural communities to do the chips of laptops at the time.
That's right.
I mean, you know, so there was nothing magical, but they went to those communities. They didn't have electricity. They were using battery-powered, you know, power to get into building those circuits, and then they got distributed, you know, taken to the big corporates, which will then put into the laptops. Does that still happen? Yes, it does happen across numerous fields, but we haven't focused into those things.
That's right.
We need to build, but we need to dream big. I'm not saying currently maybe people are not dreaming big, but maybe, you know, you've made an example. We don't fund, not to say we are anti a saloon, but I think there could be creative ways in which how we fund saloons. We're talking of how do we circulate the rand within the black community, if I can use the term, in the township. How do you do it? Because most of the community just consume. They go to outside Soweto, they go and buy these hair products and bring them and resell them. They make small margin. Have they thought about creating their own manufacturing business? Of course, they will tell us about hurdles, but we need hustlers. We need people that believe and have a passion on that which they want to do and not mimic what others are doing. There is an opportunity because every black woman, they use hair, you know, products.
It's a multi-billion dollar industry.
It is our own industry because we consume those products. But is there anybody making strides towards developing that? And it can be only
it
one. It
comes to the information and the education that Sham was talking about. But Bokang, let's bring in here, I mean, government saying we, for example, have got a policy in place like 70% locally procured goods so that we support entrepreneurs. Are you beginning to feel that as an entrepreneur? Is it making any difference in your business?
I think most definitely. I mean, well, currently we are in about over 150 stores because we did manage to get into retail. But that's obviously after 3 years of knocking and them saying no. Why? Because... Yeah, exactly. So my husband and I, we are hustlers, and we didn't stop, you know. We kept knocking and knocking, and like you are saying, our idea was totally different because it's a kiddies clothing brand, but the characters are not white, they are black for African kids. We live in South Africa, and the African continent, where, you know, approximately, 70-something% of the population here is brown, but when you walk into stores, you don't see anything brown. So we fought very hard to get into retail, and finally we are in. But of course, you know, we want other retailers to come on board and buy into the idea because, you know, we're not just selling clothes, we're not selling, you know, the black doll that you just saw on the screen. We're selling a story of hope. We're saying to a black girl, you know, you can be a girl like Bokang who comes from a village and you can win Miss South Africa. You know, the crown is a symbol of success can be whether you want to get into business, you want to be a doctor, anything you want to be, you know, you can make it. Selling the story of Super Shaba character. It's a boy from Soweto who becomes, you know, a great football legend. We're selling a story of hope to the young boys who come from townships as well, to say, you're not defined by your background, you can be greater. So because we are there, unlike most young, you know, small business owners, we are in there, but you know, obviously the market still has to open. Retailers still need to open their doors to young black entrepreneurs. We need that. We absolutely need that.
And we'll come from the break and talk about that, Shab, how you're breaking that wall. Because as you mentioned earlier, we've got the consumer wall, you've got the government wall, but then you've got the corporate South Africa wall that you need to break and be able to gain access to that. We'll talk a little bit more on that when we continue next year on In Focus on Newzroom Afrika, channel 405. We're in tonight on 072-110-5584. Tweet us at Newzroom 405. You're back with us tonight here on In Focus, Newzroom Afrika, channel 405. Conversation continues. Thami Klassen, Tshabalala and Bokang Tshabalala with us tonight, and taking your views on 072-110-5584. And we are asking the question, have we successfully leveraged the local content framework to be able at least to close the inequality gap, create the type of jobs that we want to create, and set up industries in South Africa? Shaba, before the break, I was saying the third wall that one has got to break down here is the corporate South Africa wall. How are you finding it? Is there resistance there? And what initiatives can you cite in your own business that you've used to be able to crack that and gain access?
It's very, very tough. Firstly, to get into retail, it's a mammoth task. And once you're there, you're competing with well-established brands. We're into character clothing, so you can imagine there's Spider-Man, there's Superman. Those are big brands. But we are competing, and we needed that opportunity. But it does not end there. You know, we want to grow in the space. We want to be in the manufacturing as well. We want to be in the supply as well. So it's difficult, but you know, I'm optimistic that with the support of government and endorsement, you know, we can get somewhere. And so far, you know, with the association of Proudly SA, you know, we managed to maneuver around so many obstacles. You know, so endorsement does help, and the association as well.
Yeah, the support of the association.
I was saying, I think another thing that really helped us was the fact that when we kept knocking and they kept saying no for a good 3 years, then we took the little bit that we had and created the products ourselves. So now when we were going to present, we were not just taking a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation. We had the goods, because that's how much we believed in it. And we just knew it will do the talking for us, because it was absolutely a brilliant idea. But also, like I'm saying, it kind of separates us from the other young people of this country, because they might not even have, you know, the few thousands of rands to start the business in the first place. And
is that also not
it's a tough one.
A barrier to entry? Look, I mean, in business, they always say you've got to have skin in the game, because, you know, at least you value that a little bit more. But is it not a barrier to entry for others who are not like Siphiwe and Bokang, who might not be able to have skin in the game?
Look, to a certain extent, yeah, it is. I mean, I don't want to underplay, you know, the impact of not having quite a very robust financial system that always sees people who have failed as those who are doomed to be thrown in the dustbin, you know. But those who have failed in other countries, take USA, for example, they believe in people who have failed. Well, how many times have you failed? 5 times. You are the best, you know. If you failed once, no, man, come back again. You try, you know. So we have to have institutions. But unfortunately, even from school, Tabo, this is your teacher telling you, if you have failed, you are out, you are useless, you know. So there must be, this is the culture I'm saying, the culture of entrepreneurship. Let me just explain this a little bit, because when you take a kid who studied in the so-called suburbs, white suburbs, and one from our so-called township where you grew up, the issue of doing business, entrepreneurs, fairs, was foreign to us. You know, the township, we didn't do it. But in the so-called suburb schools, Model C, whatever you want to call it, it was a normal thing, to teach kids how to learn to trade, to buy things and sell. What does it mean? So that's a culture we need to inculcate, because ultimately we have people who just want to take their placards and wait on the streets and want to just watch your car asking for money. And instead of using their minds to try and create a product, you've got access to people, you see people walking up and down, and I'm impressed about how people have thought about new innovative things. It's a simple thing that they've developed. As an example, the doll, a black doll. Because if you look at the history, I know black Americans also did the same. We've always had during Christmas time, white Jesus, I know I'm going to be controversial here, but that's what the picture you get, Does it identify with a culture where people are looking at suffering, every day? So those are the things that I'm talking about when I say culture. Our culture, we need to have people believing in themselves. When they see themselves, when they see Shaba succeeding, how he did, then it's more, because they assimilate that success. It's not, I've got to go and borrow from suppose Klassen was white, so you got to borrow from Klassen there, but you can borrow from Tshabalala, because you see him, he lives in the township, he hustles, but you see how he produces things. So it's a lot of construct that we've got to deal with, because ultimately people then think that when we put a program like industrial parks or SEZ, and government announces that we've got maybe 1 billion to support infrastructure, and everybody says, no, we need access to that amount of money. Yes. It's not the real question. Yeah. The real are fundamental issues. I do believe, for example, in what Gauteng has been doing over the years, knocking on those doors to say, how do we develop township economy, and they've got a township bill to address those things. They tried at one stage to procure or reserve, rather, procurement for cooperatives at one stage, in groupings, hospitals, and all those kind of things, also in KZN. Those are good initiatives, because that's what you need to teach people how to go and fish for yourselves. Here's opportunities, So there are those little, I think, green offshoots that we've seen in the past, but we need to move, because we are in the digital age. Yeah. And this equalizes everybody. Coding is available to the kids and youth. Let them access it. But we need to inculcate beliefs in people that you can do it. Yeah. Instead of you need to go.
Let's talk about this green. Okay. Yeah.
No, sorry. No, I was actually going to say I fully I agree with you, because today I actually told a story of how my father is a retired principal, but on the side he was running a chicken business. And because of that, he was able to literally give us a life that could afford the things that his salary couldn't, like me getting a car when I was in varsity and all of that. And but
lucky. We're in government, we're not supposed to do that.
Yeah. You see, so he was running this side business that so he could give us the things that he just couldn't afford with his salary. Right. But the other thing that I think is important is I think there has to be a way in which you and government, you go into these communities and you teach black people how to formalize their businesses. Mm-hmm. Because if you go to my father now, he's been doing this for years. He's still doing it even though he's turning 17 the next 2 weeks. There's still no financials. Yeah. So even if we wanted to grow the business...
Record keeping is not part of it.
Do you understand what I'm saying? So that mama somewhere who sells amagwinya or who has a spaza shop, even if she wants to expand the business, the first thing you're going to ask is, can we see your financials? And she will not be able to produce that. And I think in terms of making people believe in themselves, I think it's a very important element, because I spoke about it as well today, and I said, as black people, we are so ashamed of the things our parents have done, in order to get us where we are today. Yeah. So if your father was selling chickens, you're a bit too embarrassed by it. It's something you want to shy away from. If your mother had a spaza shop, you're not, even if you have an opportunity to go to university, you do not say, what did I study? Let me come back and, add on and improve this business. It's a spaza shop. Actually, we can have a shop, if I work on it. And I mean, to be honest with you, that's how white people are creating their generational wealth. because, you know, these kids start working in their parents' businesses. It could be a simple thing like farming chickens. You know, you start working the business, you know from a little chick needs a starter and this and that, you know, in order to grow. This is where the market is, and.
You understand the value chain.
You understand the value chain from a very young age, and even when you go to varsity, or you come back and you give back into the, you know, into the family business.
We're going to run out of time. I want to touch on this very quickly. 11, I think, at the time, designated special economic zones in various provinces: Limpopo, KwaZulu-Natal, Eastern Cape, Mpumalanga, Free State, as well as in Gauteng. At some point, the automotive economic zone was opened here by the president, and billions of rands were promised as investment from the private sector. Are we beginning to reap the benefits of these SEZs?
Yes, certainly. I think we can attest to that through the figures and of job creation, companies that invested in these special economic zones, and how we've tried to retain some of the companies, or most of the companies that were in these previously, you know, the old dispensation industrial parks, which were constructed along these homeland systems, you know, to try and incentivize, you know, using people at that reservoir, you know, from different locations, you know, and giving these at the time, Asian companies a lot of incentives to just keep the labor pool contained in that area. But there was nothing that was happening, you know, because they were just being boosted by that type of funding. Fast forward, that created the vacuum, because when things started to open up the economy, then you see how bad, and some of these companies started leaving because there was no longer that kind of incentive. So this is where you come from with a program, for example, of revitalizing those township economies or enclaves, because they were important in providing jobs, but they didn't make much effort in creating enterprises. Because those, if you go to any of the enterprises, more than 80, I mean, you'd be lucky to get 20% of those companies that operate there being black companies. It's still foreign. It's still some of the previously white companies that run those. So that's the problem. Coming to the special economic zones, we've got 10. Actually, the 11th one is the one you just referred to, but it's one because it's still using the same license with the OR Tambo. It's in Gauteng. Well, it has done phenomenally well in terms of displaying how we are now thinking about the new model. We are now thinking about the new construct of improving our special economic zones, you know, a complement. The three spheres of government contribute, you know, in terms of making that sustainable. We not only contribute in terms of funding, but in terms of building that construct. You referred to earlier this laborious process of us having to apply for permits, you know, quite a long thing. We can also shorten that, and we've proved it, whether it's EIA, getting the water permits and all those other important things during planning and constructing, getting those permits. If we all talk together and we have runners that make sure that investors' time is not wasted. Ford was a very important key an anchor investor for us. I mean, the communities there have benefited, you know, astronomically. That is the small business. More than 1.2 billion rand has been spent to date towards the SMMEs. The targets that have been reached are more than 45% of the procurement spent. You know, so the program is working well, and it shows that, you know, these elements of tensions oftentimes between companies and communities can also be resolved. We've got active social facilitators. Now this is where education comes in, because you still have 30%ers, you know, groupings that want to destroy what you are trying to achieve. But communities themselves protect when you build, because they see a vision. They've also employed quite a number of youth and are training quite a number of youth. They've got about 600 robots that have been built into the zone there by Ford. You know, they're also doing renewable energy, putting solar, and you know, there's a new innovation that's coming there. Challenges, yes, they are there. You know, in the automotive and during the construction. One of them being energy, but we are addressing them. We're seeing ESCOM bringing ESCOM, Department of Energy, you know, Metro, and the province, and us national as DTIC coming together to resolve those problems. So it's active, you know, construct of the economy, as opposed to people sitting there and criticizing. We've seen that also with Kucha. We're seeing that with Dube Trade Port, where we've got, again, another special economic zone doing quite various fields and offering as well, sectors that is here.
Shaba, as we close, local content, has it created jobs? What have you seen in your own business?
Yeah, it has. We've created jobs, in our office, and also the clothes that we manufacture. We've created over 100. So we have created jobs, but it's not enough. We want to create more. Yeah. We want to create as many as we can. So we need, an opportunity to grow big so that we can empower others as well. Remember, being in this platform is not only about us. It's important that we do it right. We don't cut corners, so that the ones that are coming, we create a great path for them, so that there's more black players in the space. I think it's a historical fact that the economy is in the hands of the minority. We have to change that, not only by talking but action. It's a step. We've already undertaken that path of trying to change that narrative as well. Yeah. Yeah. So we need opportunities, and my plea to government is to come up with programs that will empower the youth, academically as well, and give them an opportunity, make access to funding an easier exercise as well, because it's a huge stumbling block.
Absolutely. The other layer, of course, human capabilities. A business like yours, Shaba is mentioning, for example, those who manufacture, and the kind of capabilities and skills that you've created.
Sure. I mean, it's a lot. When you look at a factory and everybody that works inside a factory, firstly, we're utilizing the factories that are already, supplying the retailers. And why that was important, like Siphiwe said, it's very simple. We didn't want to mess it up the first time around, because if we mess it up, then the next young black person who walks in, they'll be like, no, we tried, but you know what, you guys are not doing a good job, no thanks. So we really wanted to do it right, hence going back to the issue of quality. So in terms of skills, it's a lot. And these factories employ over 100 to 200 people in a factory. So we are literally, yes, we are contributing, but I mean, the plan for us now is to have our own factory, so we can make the clothes and literally be, in charge of every single area of the chain. So yeah.
Guys, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on tonight and being with us here on Focus. Thami Klassen with the DTI. He's the Chief Director for the Special Economic Zones as well as the Industrial Parks. And we have Bokang as well as Tshabalala, and they are with SBKids, entrepreneurs in the space, also part of the Buy Local Summit.